Okay, hello everyone. Hopefully my voice can be heard clearly. Okay, let's do this. So hello everyone, welcome to tonight's episode. It is 5 a.m. I'm giving this talk and it is incredibly early. I want to focus on the notion that every day the world sings its own song. It shares its own application of design, how designs occur in this natural world. The title is excuse my coughs, guys. I want to speak about an unconditional cause to a conditional effect. Right now, the human being, because it is choosing to see itself as an intelligent being, therefore its justification is based on its intelligence. Therefore, an intelligent system is where our values exist in. And an intelligent system has, in some sense, a sort of free will where there is a sort of conscious randomity. You see, everything in this world, you can say it's random particles moving in space. No particle per se has an ownership to anything else. It's as if it's just a phenomena occurring. But the way this phenomena classifies and is classified and organized by the human intelligence is very crucial. Because nowadays, in this world that we're in, to continue this world that we're in, everything in front of your eyes tends to have a condition to it, either a recognizable condition or an unrecognizable condition. But on some level, we can put the world into some sort of subjective container and acknowledge a sort of meaning that it is giving. If a person sees a certain action as good, whenever they see that action in their lifetime, they will feel it is in some sense an amplification of that. It's like the symbol visits. So what I'm trying to say is that most people think, excuse me, most people think that when you see an object, you're just seeing that object. Like, for example, there's a Tim Hortons cup in front of me right now. Okay, as I look at this Tim Hortons cup, it's as if on some level, sure, it's an object. If there were other people looking at that same object, it would just be an object. But what that object means to be, it means to me personally, has to do with how my mind is open to the conception of it. So what I'm trying to say is that the world is suddenly, the eyes of this human being suddenly spontaneously open, and as it goes through childhood into old age, it's pretty much going through various experiences, pretty much the world is changing your mind before you die. So for me, it's very unique because we open our eyes in a world, and because there's the sophistication of the evolution of language, we're not just creatures that exist, we're creatures that can articulate our existence, can see it through various dimensions, various sensitivities. So the child is starting off from a conditional reality, which means a chessboard. Pretty much the person's psychology. It's very fascinating. It's kind of like the subjectivity is language is very unique. It's as if every person enters this giant palace, but they're entering it from their own entrance, from an entrance that nobody else has entered. Pretty much your eyes share a view to the world that nobody else has unless you communicate it, for example. So from the conditions of life, from how things are set into a certain order, from the conditional, we wonder about the unconditional. And the unconditional is that which cannot be explained by any condition. So our explanatory power as a species has to do with the interpretation of reality and also the subjectification of reality. On some point we saw the world, how it was turning, and we closed our eyes, and in our minds the world began turning in many ways. What that means is, when I say the world turns in many ways, that means you can watch and you can see the same object through many dimensions. Many layers to your world. What that means is very simple. For example, there's a tree in my backyard right now. I see this tree. I see the actual tree in front of me, but I can also consider an atomic existence to it. Do you know, I can consider in some sense it having a symbolic meaning. For example, ancient esoteric societies, pretty much what knowledge was back in the day was a sort of tree, because people were under this impression the world from one trunk, from one singular point, had stretched into many realities. You see, the notion of a multidimensional anything, any setting, any sort of simulation, vision of the world that is multidimensional, something peculiar is there. Those dimensions are in one dimension. Now, this is a very bold claim to think that all the world, everything in the world is just happening in one way, right? This is an incredibly bold claim because there's so many species, so many various systems. But there's been certain ancient poets where they've kind of explained the human consciousness as if there was this grand mirror, and this grand mirror broke itself into pieces, and each piece holds a bit of the truth. What that means is every human being's eyes is seeing something about the world that is real, but in other human beings per se may not be seeing that. So it's very incredible to notice that if reality starts from we are kind of like this human existence of ours in our waking state, if this is the conditional reality, okay, and the conditional reality appears multidimensional, there can be an implication the cause of this conditional effect is in some sense an unconditional singularity. Now here's the unique thing. I find that for the this is a very unique statement I'm going to say, but I'm kind of personifying mathematical language. I feel the number two, the way it experiences number one and number three is the same. I believe the number two, like what I'm trying to say there. Some people are like, "What are you talking about, sir?" I'm trying to say that whether you see reality in a singular dimension, whether you see it in like a trio, as if there's three dimensions, mind, body, soul, or you just see it all as purely matter or all as purely soul. We have different kinds of human beings on this planet. They entertain different notions. It's kind of like the number two is the beginning of multidimensionality. The number one, anything that is singular, is self-sufficient. When you look at people and their concept of what they feel independence in regards to evolutionary survival is, they feel they can rely on their own intelligence. A child cannot rely on their own. A child it does not have enough confidence to realize that the most important factor of the moment is the self. Do you know how many people on this planet, they have never thought about who they are? They have just literally been spoon-fed who they are? Just like how their parents put baby food in their mouth, the first waves of data that hit this child's mind defined it. So in some sense, there is a battle of identity all the time, because in some sense, the world is changing. That means all those people who are stressed, depressed, they're like, man, so many problems, where's paradise, all this. The problems are the natural state. Do you see what I mean? That means if you're not stressed in a changing world where you're being kept by gravity on a rock and there's so many factors involved, in some sense, it's as if we cannot avoid the natural state. This has been my greatest finding, because the mind has a possibility. If it claims free will to be the ultimate, if right now you think that your free will is the only thing that you are, you will not trust the world that you're in. You will only trust the worlds that you create. Kinda, I'll give you an example. You even see this in animal psychology, in the sense that the lion doesn't go eat like a hyena's leftover food. The lion has to kill the prey itself, because it has to go and function with its own certainty. You see the difference? The lion has to be is going based on its own reality. The hyena is like, whatever reality comes to me, I'll deal with it. So think of it this way. Even though we say we have one life, like we're all alive once, this means as much as something in this life can be lost, what is here before it has been lost is an opportunity. And when life and existence becomes an opportunity for the attention of your being, not the personality, not the content you find in your attention. Right now, if I say I'm a body, right now, if I say I'm a body, why would I personally consider that not to be a valid statement? Because the body is a content in the sphere of attention that is the moment. So this was something very grand. The human mind is conditioned in language to constantly think of complex models over a natural reality. It's as if imagination was an attempt to attain perfection in one task. Okay? And so it's as if like even the school of Athens, this I'm talking about ancient Greece right now, where there were like Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. These guys, they had a sort of reverence for geometry and for sort of the Platonic solids. And the three-dimensional version of the Platonic solids was unseen. So as if like, for example, Plato, Socrates, these guys, they had this secret rule where it was like the three-dimensional perfect shapes. For example, like there was a cube, there was a sphere, there was a triangle. And they felt that some of the disciples in the school of Athens, their minds were not ready to conceive that perfect level of geometry. So it's as if in the process of evolution, self-updating itself, constantly updating the self that is experiencing. I mean, that's what's been happening, you know? It's as if there's data, there's a sort of genetical material here, this genetical sort of dimension of existence, it brings with it design. So it's as if like I consider my face to be a sort of realness that is given. So what I mean by that is like you can say reality is given imagination. It's solidified imagination. Okay, if you entertain reality as a sense of mind, but if you entertain reality as a body, then imagination is the effect of reality. Do you see the difference? Do you see the difference in the atmosphere of a sense selfhood that this ignites? So in other words, again, if I could say it, it's like if I consider existence literally this waking moment of my intelligent being, like right now how I'm here. If I consider all this to be materialistic, that means anything that happens in the moment, its cause is matter. Now, if the cause is matter, the person will feel the nature of the universe is programmed. You will feel it's a simulation. If you think reality is just materialistic, that one of the most like pretty much the pentacle of the most sophisticated philosophy you can have of the material universe, that it's like mysteriously here. And mystery is another word for simulation. Because when you're in it, you cannot see beyond it. How many times have we seen, both in movies and real life, an angry person is so convinced by their viewpoint of who is right and wrong that even if they're blaming the wrong guy, somebody who had nothing to do with the situation, the angry person thinks there's a justification. Violence is when your mind makes it okay. Violence is any person who's violent, you can say it's as if that person has momentarily gone insane. Let me tell you what I mean by that, because a definition of insanity is, Albert Einstein says it, it's like doing the same, it's like wanting different results but endlessly doing the same thing, right? So it's something in life that you're unaware of, so it's repeating, right? And when that phenomena repeats, it accumulates into a burst. It's like a slingshot, right? So sometimes you can say insanity, especially as we study it in we see in society, like literally I go downtown Toronto, I go work there, and when I'm there, like in my breaks, I see on the streets like some savage minded human beings. They smile as if they have the same sensitivity as the common man, but I'm telling you, there's very uncommon beings. That means there are people you will sit at the same table with thinking they are saints, but they are sinners. And there will be people you will be sitting at the same table with where you will think they are sinners and you will see they are saints. Pretty much vice versa. So my personal attempt, Mr. Within's attempt with the title of tonight's episode, is that it's very important where we put the cause and where we put the effect. The notion of the cause is so important because when you look at what religion is, people are worshiping an intelligent cause. Religion was an attempt to make the source of the universe have a sort of personality. It's as if it's not that man is made in the image of God. When man attempts to conceive God, he only sees his image. So eventually God will be his image. So we are made in the image of God. It's as if like that. It's like that's all we can see. There's a poet by the name of Rumi, Jalaluddin Maulana Rumi. This kind of ancient Persian poet from 700 years ago. He says, I have lived on the edge of insanity, wanting to know reasons, knocking on a door. Pretty much he felt like the world was a simulation and he wanted to find its like source, its roots, the roots of the existential simulation. And what happens is, he says, I have lived on the edge of insanity, wanting to know reasons, knocking on a door. Now check this out. He says, the door opens, but I have been knocking from the inside. Now many people can't understand what he means by this, Rumi. But what he means is that he was looking to change external reality through external reality, and it's impossible because it's a vastness. It's like trying to measure an ocean with like a pitcher. Like, do you know what I mean? Like with a cup, like you can't fill the cup with the whole waterfall. So what that means is when external explorations are considered, there's no way we can get an index of the whole thing. So scientific analysis and mathematical probability of many possibilities, it will be seen as hollow self-entertainment. You see? That means there is some precision work. I find that it's not that the evidence that science shows is the truth, it's that the method led to a result. For me, a lot of things in this life, it's like it's incredible. Like your mind can have an ability to see everything integrated, relevant, connected to one another. Or your mind can see things separate. You can see two people and think they have nothing to do with one another, suddenly realize they're brothers. Do you see? It's as if you saw a situation separately, but then your attention also could conceive the collectivity. And because your mind, whatever you choose, if you think right now you might be sitting and feeling like I'm a bad man, I'm a sinner. You might be sitting right now at a table feeling like I'm the greatest person ever. Like, do you know, you can have so many different masks of thought in a moment. You can have endless masks of thought. The issue is, how long does the being want to wear it? How long does life need to be an exchange, a constant back and forth between the conditional and unconditional? You see, let me tell you how wisdom arises in the human being. Wisdom doesn't arise just because the person's like, okay, I got the right experiences, I followed the program, yay, I'm wise. Like it's not like that. Wisdom arises through an impatience for ignorance. So suddenly, when it becomes important for you as a human being, what you don't know, literally what you feel like this kind of blankness in your mind that has not been filled yet with conceptual meaning. Like what you don't know, believe it or not, can set you free from what you know. I asked friends of mine an incredible question. I was even fascinated by the question I asked. And I asked them, do you think a happy person, a person who every moment is trying to be in heaven, trying to in every moment have, in some sense, like some sort of satisfaction to be happy all the time? Pretty much I asked, does a person wants to be happy all the time? Is that person intelligent? And my personal answer is that no, If I want to right now as a human being just want everything to be ordered, everything to be happy, it's an ignorance of the law of change. For the human being that is wondering about the weaves of the fabric of existence and the texture of reality, you will be pushed towards how subjective design is simultaneously occurring with objective design. You will pretty much wonder if your free will is physical or non-physical. If it is non-physical, it appears as a witness. It appears as a memory's purpose. Do you see? I have had moments in this life where I've looked at the sky and I've shouted. Just internally, not like outside, I wasn't saying anything, I was just looking at the sky. But internally, I have shouted at the sky and I'm like, why is this data in my eyes? Why is existence being me right now? And I recognize the kind of linguistic simulation the species finds itself. We find ourselves in a world where language has been accepted because we have no other technology. It's as if, imagine the caveman having a curiosity ahead of its time, as if the caveman drew a painting on the cave after it made fire, and it had no idea. It just drew. It just drew something. Okay? Yet, the human beings that evolved afterwards, after many millions of years or so, they found meaning in the action. So we as human beings could be doing things right now that we right now may never understand their meaning, never understand their value, but it is how the future opens their eyes and takes what it needs. For me, I realize society is becoming desire oriented. And because it's becoming desire oriented, technology is the salvation. It's as if man got rid of the concept of God. Do you see? This is why we see secular societies use technology to their advantage more than religious societies, religious communities. The reason is because the level of contentment and how the world has been opened. Language for me, it's not that important. For me, language is like color, which I draw when I speak. It's as if I am painting a picture for you. I am drawing something on a canvas of that is empty space. So just like how different words are being written, different images sequentially come to the individual throughout this lifetime of the overall image. The world has accepted itself too soon. Rather than exploring nature with our free will, we jumped into a technological box. We as human beings have never been exposed to this much technological influence in society. And then at the same time, return to nature and to discover the true survivor. You see, right now, if they took the technology of the human being away, survival of the fittest would be a totally different dilemma. So many people, just overall in the planet, they don't respect law. They don't respect the laws that are required to maintain civilization and civility. Now, let me tell you what the issue is. Those laws are attempts to, as Carl Jung would say, make the unconscious conscious. You see, evolution is not. I'll get into this. I didn't want to bring it up, but I'll get into it. Evolution is a strange thing. It's a very strange thing. Even how Charles Darwin explained it. It may be Darwinian, in our academic fields, the notion of evolution, but it's being worshipped in our academic fields. It is not being questioned. The moment a person wants to be correct, the moment they want an idea to be true, it's not that that idea is like shouldn't be true. It's that the whole world has been forgotten. And some people don't say this, but magic was not always an evocation of some intelligence. Sometimes magic was forgetfulness. As if a blindfold could be, somebody putting a box on someone's head could be like magic. The person is manipulating the reality of that individual. But the box can be taken off, which means the box never needed to be there. And when you look at the suffering of nature, what can you do about it? Dear viewer, we as human beings interact with one another, and there is levels of identity, various egoic constructs kind of relating with one another. Because everybody is seeing a different world, everybody is being a different kind of person. There has to come an effort from within the person to want to recalibrate what is real to them. And they have to realize, we as a species have to realize, that we cannot avoid integration. It's as if you suddenly see you had a thought in one part of the world, then you go see in another part of the world somebody else had that thought. Various cultures around the world, it's as if human beings have emerged from those cultures, and it's as if their insight was in accordance to a field of intelligence where in other parts of the planet people were also behaving in similar ways. So this implies a field of intelligence at work. Now, when we let's say if we just even have the precision of a scientist, and we ask ourselves, okay, if we're a field of energy, not a field of intelligence, okay, you can say intelligence is like conscious energy, I don't know how else I don't want to define it too much, but anyways, if we say that there is an electromagnetic field that every human being has. For example, when you see blacksmiths kind of with a hammer hitting a molten kind of sword on an anvil, like back in the day, if you ask yourself, why is that guy doing that? Most people think, okay, he's flattening the sword by hitting the hammer to the sword. However, what people don't know is, in an electromagnetic view, it's like the gravitational. It has to do with the Earth. It has to do with the gravitational pull of the Earth and its electromagnetic field. And it's a use of a sort of invisible force. You see, it's like there's a reason the hammer was, in some sense, chosen as a godly weapon. It's not just in Thor, like in Nordic mythology, we find people having a hammer. Because the hammer was the symbol of like the god ultimate, something that could create and something that can destroy. And you are both the creator and the destroyer. You see, we see our society right now is worshipping not worship, like is idolizing creators. We're like creativity, we're like new ideas, we're just basing things on the new, as if we're paying attention more to how things can get started in society, and so technologies are blooming. But as much as a person can be a creator in their moment, they can also be a destroyer. And the implication of the creator and destroyer, these are archetypes of how your attention moves in and out of value in this life. I am telling you, you will, in this lifetime, just throughout the day, just pay attention to it. You will have moments where you are attributeless. You're just the presence of a sort of energetically manifested attention. That for me, most people think divinity has to be some supernatural, multidimensional, like next level thing. I'm telling you, it is not. It is how life is simply here. It's just a sort of magnificence in its simple presence. And when that hits you, when you see, it's like if you wanted to say the surface of the ocean is like a multidimensional reality, or let me, how would I say it? It's like behind your eyes, you don't have to be a thought. And there's a liberating fact, there's a liberation to that. Now, me, by just saying that sentence, is something, sometimes, guys, something interesting I could tell you. Let me just share this. It has to do with when I give these talks, sometimes I hear, like, let's say I say a sentence, and then I have, like, in my mind, a sort of various philosophers I've read about in history, and I kind of, my mind animates, like, as if they are saying the quotes I know from them. Do you see? And it's as if, how can I tell you, my mind criticizes itself more than the world can. But anyways, what I'm trying to get to is, you want to understand a country, you look at its governing system. You want to understand the human body, you look at what governs it. You want to understand the unconscious, you have to wonder about what governs it. And if what governs the unconscious is unknown, it's just out of the human scope of sensory vision, sensory perception, then the search has to stop and just the position has to be embraced. It's as if you're a commander who's been at war for many years, a general on a battlefield, like Sun Tzu style. And after so many years of constant battle, war, it's as if you realize it was all meaningless. And then what can this war like general do? The general automatically lets go of the reality. It's as if a great warrior is not just based on how they can pick up the weapon or how they can use the weapon. It's how easily they can put down the weapon, how easily they can put that mindset away, how easily their attention can move towards a freedom that never needed the past, in some sense, in linguistic engagement. It's as if we need to create a game between the different hemispheres of the brain. As if different, if you, like for me, I have this very important theory, I've said it in some of my writings, where I say the whole educational system, everything that human beings have, in some sense, we have like a language developed so far. My vision is that everything has to relate to the human body. Because if knowledge is fragmented, think of knowledge as if the different aspects of the brain, different parts of the brain, if we have a fragmented comprehension, the relationship of the whole thing will be unknown. It's as if you're just looking at your hand, like right now when you look at your body, like we have different terms. We say hand, like legs, torso, like we use these different terms, yet it's one body, is it not? It's one whole thing. But we have ways of acknowledging segments of it. But when we acknowledge those segments, we cannot just with the definitions of the word hand comprehend everything else. It's like instead of me saying the brain is where everything is going, imagine I said like it's as if my hand was like replaced with my brain, for example. What I mean by what I mean by that is like why the central system be in the brain? Why in that muscle? Why not in any other muscle in the body? So I'm saying it's there's a sort of unique factor to it. It's like it's like acknowledging how heaven and hell were ideas that are hovering in the same space, in the same like moment. For me, all those people who are seeking, we have these talks, sometimes they're directed at the New Age community. I want the people there to hear it. People who feel spirituality is their kind of way out of a failing system, this failing world. At some point, Sri Ramana Maharshi, this very liberated being, he said it really nicely. He said, all that you have learned, you must forget. And anybody who is seeking any sort of truth, I am telling you, there will come a moment where every belief you have held on to, it's as if a wind of a moment will hit you where all those beliefs will kind of be pushed aside like dry leaves. The nature of the experience, the rawness of your intelligence, that's where talent is born. When I see a person like this incredible guitar player on YouTube, my comprehension of how that person has their talent is they have found themselves in a moment where they've been alone with the world and they've accepted that loneliness. Therefore, they've gained access to data where their practice becomes superior. So what I'm telling you is people are afraid of loneliness, but they don't understand secret, the next levels of their intelligence are unlocked if they acknowledge it. It's as if you get rid of fear by realizing you're not a character in a story to have fear. You're a moment of change, pretty much. Okay, tell me one thing in this one physical phenomena that is not changing. You see, not only is the world underneath our feet changing, but so is our feet. You know, the genetical structure changes. So we are creatures of change. And when our attention through this change can move in different ways, it's as if free will is technically, in a macrocosmic way, never free will. For this is why astrophysicists, I don't know how they believe in the free will. How could it be the free will? It's a macrocosmic movement that's holding the microcosm, right? And we are infinitesimal to the vast infinitude and, you know, the googolplexes of distance that this universe could stretch out, you know? So for me, it's like you don't need a story to be who you are. You are already being something. This thing changes, and when you wonder what is changeless, you see it is nothing with an attribute. This shocked me because for me, it's there's one lifetime to see it all. I firmly believe this. And it's not something I believe, it's just I feel that's all that the experience can do. When I wake up in the day, at first, like for the first 20 years of my life, it was all like so important who I was to, and like the sense of self was dominant. Pretty much human beings are obsessed with themselves their whole life. You know, this is why in society somebody could get hurt and many people might take out their phones instead of helping. It's a disconnect. It's a disconnect to the naturalness. This is why dishonesty, hatred after a level of civility that has been acknowledged occurs. It's as if like actually Neil deGrasse Tyson, this astrophysicist, he said an incredible sentence where he said something like, I don't think he said exactly like this, but I think he said something like a similar image. He said, we shouldn't be doing something that is taking man back into the cave, but beyond the atmosphere. You see, scientists, I like here right in these Mr. Within talks, I kind of throw different ideas at one another at different speeds, and as they clash, it coagulates into new views. But at the same time, how can I tell you? If I asked you, how would life be if you were not a thought to yourself? It's as if we will return to a moment before the evolution of language and remember nature. The levels of nature open up to you, by the way. It's as if like some things in one moment in a certain state of consciousness don't make sense, but as the child evolves in this turning world, in this changing world, it eventually opens up to new views. So something that a person can be grateful for or happy that every day is happening is that data is moving in front of your eyes. The world is not like a still photo. It doesn't matter if it's good or bad. Design-wise, there's the magnificence of change. This is how like I find like the ego, it is best used playfully. A person should not think themselves as a thought. They should only think it playfully or only through an intent of using it as a technology. It's as if like you live in your house, you don't live in your car. Like that's in some sense, the structure of the social system. And because the person lives in their house, the car is like a technology they access. Just like you open your phone to call someone, you go enter that vehicle, that car, and you drive to a location, buy groceries, come back. Right? So it's as if a vehicle was used, a certain state was entered for the intentions of a result. So the way that I was kind of disappointed, I can say, by the Western entertainment industry, because in some sense, when you repeat something, you have denied a new moment's existence. It's so important, the story that you find yourself in, because that story defines your energy levels, defines your power, and defines your strength. And this true strength is not physical, it comes with vision. Vision means alertness to the center of your awareness, which for all beings comes to them as their here and now. You know, like imagine Eckhart Tolle saying it, here and now. I can't do Eckhart Tolle's voice, you know. Man is too calm, you know. It's like there's some unique lines of poetry are coming to me. I'll share them. It's as if a man suddenly realized any person who goes to heaven's gate, towards the gate of paradise, and paradise is another word for the ultimate. Pretty much all these people that you see, like people see the Dalai Lama, people see like yogis and all these people, and they're like, what primitive like people? But they don't understand. They are seeking the ultimate. They have found something more important than all their desires, where their desires are coming from. The person has wondered about the nature of their intelligence. They have noticed the objective component, but now they're wondering what is the purpose of the subjective component. Because I'll tell you, I have a memory personally in this lifetime before I learned language, just an early childhood memory. Like I think I was very young, like 10 months, I don't know, less, like 8 months or something, and there was no language. There was literally no language. It was just sight. And then, as years have gone by, and I've ran 28 laps around the sun, suddenly it's as if I've opened my eyes one day, and I'm like, who am I? And I had so many ways that sentences come to my mind, so many viewpoints come to my mind, and I'm like, am I really all these thoughts I have? Is it possible for me in one moment to be just the thoughts of that moment? It's as if imagine somebody comes to out of the street, somebody you've never met, and says, "You're a very bad person," and suddenly leaves. So when that person says you're a very bad person, how would the psychology of the individual react to it? Would they believe random information that has come to them? Would they choose to be defined by that information? Or would the person say, okay, that person has no idea who I am because I don't know who that person is. So whatever impression that person has of my badness is limited to their experience. It's as if no living person on this planet, believe it or not, has the experience you are having. There's no one enlightenment because we're not the same being through the individual position we come. It's as if it's impossible to see the same thing when we all have different eyes. Even the colors of our eyes are different. Like that's even a clue, So for me, what happens with data? You have to sculpt it. Pretty much, life is like this chunk of clay, and as Michelangelo, this great Renaissance sculptor, says, I saw the angel in the stone and I set it free. And that sentence, the reason I always remember it, because it encapsulated something I was really trying to find words for a long time. I have had so many experiences where I could not put it into language because the language was not, like our language had not evolved to it. I've been able to put certain, like just like how I use words to explain experiences, I have also, in my own, I guess how do you say, idiosyncratic way. For me, geometry is a language. I'm that kind of weird guy in civilization, I guess. Not weird, but I'll say like this uncommon kind of person saying that geometry is the next great language of all languages. Because ancient civilizations are as advanced as we are as advanced to comprehend. The world is limited to our eyes, yet we are aware of our eyes, hence we can move beyond that limitation, and comes the meaning of life. Objectively, life doesn't have that much meaning. It's again like the child before it had language enter its system, before it individualized into a character in a story that could have emotions. Your ego is very profound because without an individual consciousness, there's no emotion. Collective beings, there isn't an emotional reality because there isn't just one. It's as if like a collective being could be said to be the ocean, and individual consciousness could be said to be like a drop. And this life moves in many ways. It has to do with how your attention, in some sense, is the architect of the thoughts that, in some sense, light up with meaning as you look throughout the day. So for me, it's like Believe it or not, it's like everybody on this planet, imagine they were a unique martial artist of their own style. Imagine every human being on this planet knew their own next level, like martial arts. Like, for example, I don't know if I can pronounce the guy's name right, but the founder of judo, the founder of aikido, Moriya Ushiba, for example, that dude found his own fighting style. He was a master of his own art, right? And so the thing is, I find every human being is a master of their own art, yet they have not explored, they have not cared to see the vastness behind their eyes, the ability their vision can bring. Because stories are too like imagine somebody again, somebody people can tell you anything. What is deciding? What is valuing in your intelligence as something as real and unreal? Where is the veil of thought that suggests imagination and reality are different zones of acknowledgement? We can the unconditional cause is like an empty page, and what's being written on it is the conditional effect. The words will find themselves limited to the space of the allowance of their being. The secular society's God is nature, pretty much. I think it will come down to that. So beauty in nature is like the beauty in nature is something that both the secular society and the religious society can both acknowledge. It's like their common ground that life has a beauty to it, but the depth of that beauty is under debate. So what I'm saying is there's this idea I say that there was idol worship. Now we're in an era of ideal worship. That means people used to worship objects. They thought objects were the truth, right? But then somebody's like, nah, man, it's not objects. So what did people go to next? They went to subjects. And suddenly language and books became the kind of projectors of truth, okay? So now, till this far, like 2019, we are still worshiping ideas. I'm not kidding. That's what a belief is. It's as if you keeping your attention on one thing because you're either too lazy to see something else or you're too comfortable to change. That's the issue with fear. It makes you believe a limited sense of self. The journey can be glorified in many ways. I want to share an experience that I think it may be a bit like you guys might feel it's I'm sharing something really personal, but I feel I should share it. I don't know why. In 2017, I found myself in a hotel in Mozzate, Italy. Sorry, not Mozzate, Italy, Chislago. Chislago. Anyways, this hotel, it had 3 floors, and uh, I reached there at night, and um, I check into my room. Now it had such a long hallway. This hotel, it had such a long hallway, and because I smoke cigarettes, in that moment I was like, oh my God, there's no way I can constantly like go up and down this hallway. So there was a sort of window, giant window, and on the window had a sort of ledge, like this sort of ledge where it was enough for someone to sit there, like it was for it had a solid foundation, but it like literally when I sat there outside the window, like having a cigarette, and that how can I say it, like a like like a feet in front of me, like literally my feet were very close to the edge of the building, so I could see the three floors down. Literally, I was on the edge, but it was in a safe distance. It wasn't like in a dangerous way. So, anyways, I remember I was there sitting in that and it wasn't a balcony, by the way. It was like window, kind of. I don't know. Anyways, so I remember I sat there and I was having a very kind of troubled uh, night. Like it was a dark night of the soul that night for me. And I remember my mind suddenly behaved in ways where it hadn't for a while, where I reverted into a sort of, my mind was, I was constantly reducing my own value to myself in my thoughts. So I was so depressed and stressed in that moment that I had reduced the value of myself to like nothing. So it was like I don't want to say it was a suicidal moment in that situation, but it was like literally life had no value. It was like empty, right? Or I felt, at least for me, it was empty, you know? But check this out. So I get caught, and I remember I'm just thinking, man, why did this happen in my life? Why did that happen like this? And suddenly my mind thinks of all the bad things that have happened so far to me. You know, all the, when I say bad, like inefficient things and efficient things, I categorize them, you know? And so in that moment, my mind was generating a sort of sob story for my own history. And I was in this constant sort of like, man, what's the point? And then my mind thought, okay, you can end it all right now. The ledge is here, you know? And then I thought, what's the point if I'm eternal? Like, what's the point of this eternal continuity? So it's like literally I had no interest in death because I had no interest in life, you know? So it was a sort of strange kind of sorrow I found myself. Like I'm laughing about it now, but at the time it was intense. But something unique happened. In the middle of this depression and stress kind of cyclical thought, where I was constantly just like breaking myself for all the wrong things I did in my life. Like literally, I was feeling the weight of all my sins and stuff. All, or you can say all the uh, ignorant moments of my life and their consequences. And so what happens is that suddenly the most unique thing happens in the middle of me having tears of sorrow and sadness and stress and depression and just like this whole despair, this nostalgic despair, you know, I suddenly get bored in the middle of the one of the worst moments of my life. I get bored of my stress and depression. I'm like, what is this? Why does my mind think it like constantly in this moment is just telling itself, like it's as if like that moment where the person has that negative self-talk in their mind, but the negative self-talk, imagine, continues for too long and you're like, wait a minute, it's just like this self-talk isn't even me, you know? So in that situation I suddenly got bored of how the problems in my life were looping, were constantly cycling, and I'm like, what is this? And then something strange happened. In an instant, the feeling of sorrow went away. And I think it's what a true what they say. Some psychologists, they bring up a notion in some sense that the child's attention, the human being's attention, is still like its childhood. Like if you have an inner child, you're still like when there's a young child, the child has a toy, it's smiling, laughing. When you take the toy away, suddenly it's like it cries and it's like, oh my god, where'd my heaven go, you know? And then suddenly you bring back the toy and the child is suddenly happy again, as if the child wasn't offended or anything, you know? So attention revolves the world of meaning. Your attention is your being. So there are certain moments, I never finished the quote I wanted to say about Rumi. Maybe I did, I don't know, but anyways, I'll say it again. A bird has two wings, and it requires those two wings to fly. The human mind, in some sense, its two wings are chaos and order. And when the bird realizes the point of life is not chaos, the point of life is not order, it is a navigation of the witness of both of these into the true presence. That's when our civilization will, it's like the era of idea worship will end. We will literally stand differently as beings because the world has found a new meaning. And the world's meaning is changing all the time, and this is why normality is never normality in a changing world. I'm sorry to say, but every generation thinks what they're doing is what people did before, yet it is not. The inspirations of action are transcendental. I ask myself, this eternal urge to for a temporary being to continue, which we say is is another way of saying, to be honest, evolution. So this, I was like, why evolve? Why does nature want to evolve? And that's when silence really, you find meaning in silence. In moments of silence, the soul breathes in actually where it is. So I find that after a person becomes aware of the linguistic simulation, they become aware of the language threshold. These are concepts I've created to imply the edge of reality being language. And the issue is not if the planet, like let's say if the planet wanted, just as a kind of playful thing to say on the side here, if the planet did want world peace, the issue is not people being peaceful. The issue is that, let's just imagine everybody was suddenly peaceful, is how long we could accept that story for the world. And that's again, the brilliance of this cosmic design. No story can own it. Language cannot own matter, and matter cannot own language. Attention stands. It's so liberating when you realize you are right now nature. You are literally the particles of this universal sector manifest and aware of your manifestation. We do have, for example, the science fiction industry, the fantasy industry. A lot of stories are generating in fields of imagination rather than fields of reality. These sci-fi stories are nice, but when you want something in the future, you miss out on what you have in the present moment. I was raised in a country that it was a theocracy. Like till the age 7, I was raised in Iran, and Western culture did not exist in my mind. And then at the age of 7, I come to Vancouver for a couple of years, and then family's direction goes back to Iran, and then I live a couple of years in Iran. Then I finally settle in Toronto. But I wanted to say that it's like the religious mentality is all about preserving attention on a single point, on a single point of this existence. When you go look at meditation, it was single, what was the words they used? A single pointed uh, concentration. You're concentrating on a single point. Now, the religious people are concentrating on an inconceivable single point. God, the ultimate mover, the prime mover, you know. But for example, yogic practices, which is a polytheistic kind of setting, that means many gods are in the cosmic game rather than just one. And in this notion, in the polytheistic thing, it's as if meditation was to, like, the person was meant to look at a river until they were the river, something like that. And so it's as if, again, single pointedness. And that once you really look at how your attention moves, you feel alive in your body. It's a level of an energy relationship with energy, which has nothing to do with your thoughts on energy or with how matter is. It has to do with just how the moment is watching itself, where the attention is, and whether there is contentment or whether there is a feeling that the person should sometimes. Imagine there's this war and there's all these soldiers who don't have swords but their heads are behind these shields, okay? And these soldiers, because they're afraid, they don't move the shield. They've constantly shielded themselves from the world. Now one of the soldiers feels a tap on his, like, tap of a sword on his shield, and the guy, he doesn't want to bring his head up to see even who's tapping on the shield. And the guy's like, no, this is all intense, it's all war, and it's like, I can't trust the world and all this, I don't know, this is the enemy. And then eventually the guy, somehow, let's say something happens, the guy moves his head above the shield and sees it's the general saying, what are you doing, man, hiding under that shield in the middle of a war? And so again, in a changing world, I don't think the purpose of life is per se, like, I have my own critiques on the metaphysical roots of mystical practice, but like, you have to be alive if you want to see what life is. And most people right now, you're hearing me, you are alive, but the nature of how this life feels alive to itself, there is an edge of language where it's inconceivable, it's unknown, and the other edge of language is known. That means, literally, if I say the word apple, you're gonna imagine like an apple, okay? But if I say the word mind, which is also in the dictionary, what would you imagine? So it's like an unknown. Do you see it? Its edge is the concept is pulled towards an unknown direction, right? Free will is an opportunity, and there's many ways to be alive on this planet, and in a sort of collective tolerance blooms the innovation of genius. So what that means is, like, the world is in a weird situation. There's incredibly vast amounts of intelligent people, pretty much everybody, you know. In comparison to any other species, our species is automatically more intelligent. And I personally believe intelligence is not measured based with a ruler of some sorts. Intelligence, whether it's a piece of paper with problems on it, like, intelligence has to do with awareness of what is happening. This is universal. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter you're an astronaut in a space station. You want to know what intelligence is? Just be aware how the designs of reality are present. After you react to it seriously, you will eventually end up to a playful state. A playful state means the future is not projected all the time. You let the future be a surprise, because why not? I mean, that's too simple of a kind of argument, but I'm saying why not? Because it's like for me, after imagine like the person's written like 1,000 books, okay? Then that person will no longer have the desire to write a book. But if an idea, great idea comes along, they will know how to write that book. We have to treat human beings as not just bodies, but as minds. This is the whole issue. This is the battle of all the isms, whether it's racism, sexism, whatever sort of ism somebody wants to generate from a context. I'm just saying, like, the discrimination is because we value the person based on how they physically look. Literally, the stardust that we're all made of, as Carl Sagan says, we're judging it. We're saying that star stuff is good and this star stuff is bad, and so we have reasons to be violent as a species. It's not true. It's just childish. It's foolishness. A majority of actions on this planet are foolishness. So before we can even think of the civilization, in some sense, uh, evolving, we have to see where the evolution is now. We have to see the limits of the potential technologies. That means a moment, like when I'm in a moment, its value is not only in accordance to what I want in that moment. The moment could have a value that has nothing to do with how I see the world, and that's when humility comes in. That's when you begin learning from the more gentler aspects of your mind. Your behavior is very crucial, because what a mind is a behavior generating phenomenon. What the free will is that which is steering the behavior. And what is behavior? How intelligence is expressed. That because we are linguistic bound, kind of cultural, social creatures, we use words to explain things. But how we put a word on something doesn't necessarily mean that how we put the word on something is correct. Like, I could look at a cup and say, yo, that's an apple. And somebody's like, what do you mean that's an apple? That's a cup. Do you see? And so there's this word play there, this word imposition. So when people are judging one another, it's the same sort of imposition, and it's an imposition limited to their own memory. So in some sense, you can never really judge people because you never know who they are. So you have to have some sort of, as the samurai did, just honor the world and function. The samurai, in honoring the world, could not even dishonor themselves. Someone, if I had a time machine, I would go back to my youth and just tell myself, it's not natural for the person to think of inefficient ideas of the self. So many people, their talents are like titans chained by commentary, by language. The wrong words in the right moment, in some sense, will be a hollow moment, and the right words in the wrong moment and the wrong words in the right moment will also be hollow. Life is it can't be explained. It's like riding the waves of space and time. Enjoying reality being not through a foolishness, but through, it's as if selfishness, individual selfishness, turns into collective responsibility. A quote where, I'll share this if I feel it's necessary to re-emphasize this quote. Rabindranath Tagore says, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted, and behold, service was joy. Indirectly, that quote is saying the way out of karmic suffering is all the joys that you're trying to get instead of taking the selfish individual route, just take the selfless collective route. Just live selflessly. That means your sense of self is not more important than the efficiency and advancement of your civilization. A new vision of humanity should move the human being. And we have to realize how many things that people are under the impression that have occurred, but it has not. The world requires to be updated by the living beings. Literally, rocks can't go build themselves into a tower. So we have to be multidimensional creatures, because why else would we leave nature to go into some sort of a paradigm of luxury and cities? Do you see? It's as if where is evolution going? And I think it's beyond the language threshold. I feel the way we become a galactic civilization, an interstellar civilization, is not per se being able to just travel everywhere in the galaxy. You know, we in some sense become an interstellar civilization by wondering about what the awareness would be like if we could go anywhere in this universe. And imagine we had gone to everywhere and we had seen everything of this infinite universe. Imagine your eyes saw infinity and then came back. You would no longer search the infinite. You will have lived the material game, and you will come to a contentment of how it's all a play of elements and there's nothing to worry about. It's just force. It's just energy manifest in a sort of uh, hologram of a human being on some level. That's the chaotic objective realm. That's where belief in matter takes you. It takes you to a strange, empty, infinite nihilism. But it's like this emptiness of life is inspiring the meaning. So because life ends, the person who just thinks they're a material being has inspiration. Because you won't be this, you have something to be. So the relationship of attention with the content or what is found in the attention, this is following on the this is under the assumption that consciousness is like a camera and stuff is moving in front of it, but stuff is moving in a 360 kind of degree. It's as if at the center of the existence of this moment, there's a witness, there's a 360 spherical witness. This witness has to do with emptiness, but not just a pure emptiness, which leads you to nihilism, but a sort of emptiness after there was something full, a sort of unknown emptiness. This unknown emptiness, there's many things in this life that have no edge. A young child goes by the sea and the parent is there watching the kid, simply not because of the poetic significance of the ocean is endless, but at the same time, it's as if we have to be careful how far we go into the unknown. And I like what I'm doing right now with these talks is charging. I am doing something where I feel the language in the attention of the being, which is for now in this sort of civilization societies we find ourselves as human beings, and it's like the language is very important. Like this whole thing about political correctness occurring in Western society, language is becoming important for people, right? But they're still not realizing its hollowness. Its hollowness doesn't mean underneath that hollowness, like the substratum isn't of intelligence. Sometimes emptiness is only kept by some sort of intelligence. It's as if somebody asked God, does emptiness exist? And God said, you are the chosen one, Neo. You know, it's like asking God why he created emptiness. It's like wondering why thought is here. It's as profound. I find human beings are like drops of vision. As these drops of vision through, I also say, even though I say we are in the era of ideal worship, but we are at the end of it. And I say that we're, in some sense, the era of advanced communication and the advanced communicators. That means I find human beings, rather than just constantly living like their ancestors into an individual mindset, that they are just this thing, that they have no value only to themselves. That is why the person allows savageness. The reason the person is okay to be violent per se does not have to do with their psychological constitution. It has to do with their, I mean, of course, on some level it does, but I'm saying like it's how far the person can see, but it has to do also with how the environment is choosing to adjust to the person. And that was the effort of society. Society was not meant to be some brutal machine of laws where if you didn't listen, you were thrown into some sort of shredder of financial despair. Like it's one of those things where society's pure intention, that means the engineers of the early societies, the first people who got into tribes, their motivation was that the collection of intelligence led to a new way of living. It's as if something one person knew, suddenly the other person in the tribe knew, you know? And therefore, knowledge was collectively evolving, right? So, automatically, human beings going into tribes is very poetically like drops of water merging into a collective sense of being. The whole point of society is that I don't want to say society is your God, like that's too intense. But society is like your family. Do you see? But for now, the way it is, it's so inefficiently designed, the person feels like a stranger. They feel they have no value, and they're either intoxicated or kind of chained to some sort of uh, loop of thought or pattern of behavior. You don't understand, sometimes life is not only about the answers, it's about the questions. Because the questions suggest how far and how deep the answer can be. When I see a problem in my life, I first wonder, just stare at the problem and wonder of its implication in various ways. And then a consideration comes. And I think this has occurred personally in me because I played chess. Like when I was younger, I don't know why. Chess seemed to me like some unique thing, right? And in chess, you have to think a couple moves ahead, but not just think a couple moves ahead. Be aware of the whole structure, be aware of the rules, be aware of the possibilities, the allowances, the authorizations. And in some sense, then it's left to your creative will. So a part of your intelligence also has to do with your free will. So what you choose will define you. And what that means is Ludwig Wittgenstein, this German philosopher, he says the limits of my language are the limits of my world. What he's saying there, in a deeper way, is in some sense, he's saying that I accept. It's like the words you use are suggesting the worlds you see. How a human being speaks, if you just legit forget about their tone and accent or anything, their voice or their sound, and just conceptually just watch like a video, like a film, what concepts their mind is generating and in what sequence, you will understand what world that person is in. And we as human beings feel many people don't see who we are behind our eyes. But trust me, every nature has is uh, is like naked. Nature sees itself. You cannot hide energy from itself. It moves into different forms, yet it is not created or destroyed. The same value scientists see in the concept of energy is pretty much the notion of the Abrahamic God, I think. Energy is God, you know? Now you see you want to conceive it, you see you can't because energy is everywhere. How can you conceive everywhere? How can you, in one moment, think you're everything? You see you cannot. Yet, the world appears. And it has to do with levels of dynamism and kind of static attention. Sometimes your consciousness can move. Literally, if you're physically moving, you have concentration. This is why as sports is like exercise, or all those people who go to the gym, indirectly they're doing a sort of meditation because they're concentrating on a singular point. And in that concentration of the singular point, they're constantly getting new ways of looking at the same thing. It's as if karma's secret is that it was only there for those who could not see beyond it. The center of the wheel of karma doesn't move. The center of the wheel of karma is now. That means if I ask you, do you like you go ask a Buddhist, like you're like, hey dear Buddhist, do you believe in karma? And then the Buddhist would be like, yeah, I believe in karma, and you'd be like, dear Buddhist, uh, if you believe in the karma of a person, do you believe the world has a karma? And the Buddhist would be like, whoa, I've never thought about the world having karma, a sort of karma to it. And then let's say the Buddhist says, yes, the world has a karma. Or the Buddhist even says, let's say, says, no, the world doesn't have a karma, the person has a karma. Let's say the Buddhist says the world is just here, the person in the world has karma. Okay? Or in Vedic thought, the transmigrating soul has karma, or has a sort of attached relationship with manifestation. So anyways. And if we were to ask, let's say the world doesn't have a karma, the person has a karma, or let's say the world does have a karma. That means the individual's karma is limited to the world's karma, which means again an inevitable position. So any person who thinks of karma, it is empty. Emptiness is the door, that's the entrance and the exit. Aldous Huxley has this quote. He says the doors of perception. He says there are things known and things unknown, and in between are the doors of perception. I don't know if this true sentence came from Aldous Huxley, but it's like the quote is ascribed to Aldous Huxley. And so, again, I'll say it again. There are things known and things unknown, and in between the door are the doors of perception. And pretty much what I've been saying is imagine there is the unknown is the subjective component to the moment. The known is the objective component to the moment. And so it's as if two eyes that see the same. You are being two types of beings in one. You're being the world on some level, and on some level you're being yourself, and there's a relationship between the two. So it's very important, because when a person really honestly is opened up to mysticism, I find it's like mysticism can be summed down to this: you don't chase the butterfly, you sit among the flowers and the butterfly lands on your forehead. You find contentment in the world, and then your true ears arise. We can say that a robot, like if somebody made a robot and programmed that robot to limited set of behaviors, We can say a person who just functions under limited certain amount of thoughts or beliefs is like a robot, is a program. You're following the program, not realizing that the value of your life is to redesign the program. It's your life. Sometimes if we really stand in the, if we think our past is greater than us, we will feel ashamed. If we feel the future is greater than us, we will also feel ashamed. If we feel the future is greater than us, we will feel inspired. And so the task of the human being in 2019 is to plant seeds which will be trees that we will not be sitting under their shadow, but the future generations will. So I feel we have to kind of clean up civilization a little bit in regards to how people are acknowledging each other as not just bodies but as minds. Like, do you know how much that changes the value of life? Imagine, like, I remember there was in 2010, for example, I would see a beautiful girl and my mind had this sort of kind of like egoic, like kind of go for it kind of moment, very direct, you know? And it's like I didn't care for emotions, kind of like a bulldozer approach. But then it was a sort of thing where you see the beauty of the person is not necessarily in how they are physically there, it's how this physical thing moves and how much they see. Sometimes I have seen people, like, it doesn't matter the physical shape of the person, it's what they see. That's what's interesting. It's how far they see. When I, for example, listen to Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson talk, which is, I find, an incredible debate to listen to. When I hear them talk, for me, I'm just sitting here, like, in the audience, just being like, how far do these people see, really? And so as they speak, you see the pictures they're painting and the worlds they're trying to, in some sense, reinvent. So anyways, guys, I feel I've spoken enough. If there's any questions about what I've said, like in this talk, because this is a live stream, I'm available if you want to ask. But my personal recommendation to the viewer is that start writing and start wondering about how your intelligence moves. Then you'll reach a state where you're no longer learning from externality. Externality becomes a mirror, it reflects you. When you see something you don't like, it doesn't reflect the object anymore, it reflects you. When you see something you like, it doesn't reflect that anymore, it reflects you. When you see a person you can't measure their intelligence, it reflects how you are measuring your intelligence. You know? This is why they also say anger is lost to its own world. It's kind of like why they say an angry person is in hell. You know, because they're chained. They're chained to how they feel the world has to be, but the world may not be that. I'm going to share this last story, and thanks for tuning in, guys. This last story is about this imperial sword master, like this person who was a kind of like imperial commander, and he was undefeated. Literally, he had never been defeated. He had a strength and will and just next level ability of fighting, as if the world had blessed him to be a savage warrior, a ruthless warrior. And so this grand warrior who had like won 70 wars and feared by everyone in the land, one day, you know, except the emperor was beyond it. Like, he was just a commander. And he's in like this sort of samurai kind of imperial gear, like think of white samurai armor or something. And after one of his last 70th war, you know, he is in the battlefield cleaning his sword and suddenly sees the reflection of his own face in the blood of the sword, on the sword, and suddenly wonders where all these people he's killed in battle are going. He wonders if there's a continuity beyond the end. And so he wonders about heaven and hell pretty much. And he comes in, in the celebration, victory of the war and all this. He tells his assistant, somebody he knows, like a close friend of his, he says, find somebody who knows what heaven and hell is. I have to go speak to that before I can fight. Not before I can fight that part. He doesn't say that. So he's like, I don't want to give this impression. This guy is savage. He's a savage warrior. Think of like Game of Thrones reference would be like the Mountain kind of like personality kind of guy. Okay, but he wonders about heaven and hell, and he has this kind of very next level arrogant ego. He's like the greatest warrior. He's the strongest person in the land, so he has nothing to fear. So his ego is literally like king, like a king. Anyways, his friend comes back and says there's this sage on top of this very nice, mountain above the clouds or something. The general says, the commander, this kind of imperial warrior, he says, thanks, you've said enough. He doesn't say thanks, he said, you've said enough. That's his dismissal of the guy's ego's big. Okay, he has a big ego. So what happens is he suddenly finds himself in front of the door of the monastery of this sage he has gone on the journey. And he's there. Like a juggernaut. That means if the way this samurai is stepping into this monastery, he just kicks the door open and he enters. And the way he's entering, think of like a transformer robot steps, like a juggernaut kind of like such a ego. His ego is like this next level advanced machine, like imagine. So I'm trying to say, very arrogantly he walks in there, stomping in, and suddenly the sage is there drinking tea, like with his buddies, you know. So the sage is drinking his tea, and suddenly this guy, and not even considering the sage, not even acknowledging their presence and being respectful or anything, he goes there and says, "Sage, tell me now, what is heaven and hell?" As if he's giving an order, and if the order is not listened to, there's consequence. You know. The sage, suddenly all his buddies are looking at him. It's like, yo, man, what are you going to say? No, I'm kidding. It's like, it's a Zen monastery. So the disciples are looking at what the Zen master's going to say. So, sorry guys, I feel I should end the podcast here, this episode. Thanks for tuning in.